Hey there guys, what is going on? It is Gail right here. Welcome back to the YouTube channel once again, and today is a long awaited video. This has been a video in the making. A lot of people have continuously asked me for this video, and while it's not a complete video because I feel like I'm going to have to split this up into multiple parts effectively, this video is the first in a series which has been requested for a very long time, and that is a team building guide. What is the best way to build a team? And I know a lot of players have been asking for this, especially starting players, but the thing is, with how different the content is in this game from mode to mode, Record Buster is different from Familiar Rush. Familiar Rush is different from War Games. War Games is different from Familiar Royale. It's just so different from mode to mode that I felt like I couldn't necessarily just make a video only. I have to split this up into multiple videos. Today, we're gonna focus on Record Buster because Record Buster is live right now, and I feel like I can explain it in a very nice way. And I think this will also give us an idea on how you guys want to see the video as well, because the way I'm going to be doing it today is going to be explaining exactly what you need in your teams, like what stats you need, how do you choose units and stuff like that. Whereas maybe in another video you want to see something else, maybe like some units that you would choose or something like that. I want to see what you guys want to see down below, so leave your comments down below, watch the video and let me know what you guys want to see, what you guys would like to see, what you guys don't like to see, so that I can, make the decision at the end of the day as to how I want to make these videos in the future. Now, of course, if you guys also go on to enjoy this video, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated. And I guess without further ado, let's go into Record Buster, shall we? So, I've already done my Record Buster run. You guys can see the score here. Where am I actually? I'm 438. I'm probably going to lose my top 500 spot here. I'm going to be around the cusp, basically, because a lot of people will just start scoring higher and higher, basically. But that's besides the point. We're not here to talk about scores. What we're here to talk about is how I build a team. So I'm going to start off with how I build a team, and I'm going to explain like what you should be doing when you're building your team. So the first thing you do when you go into Record Buster is you choose your difficulty. If you're a starting player, I'd say go all the way back. Maybe start at 2 or 3, but if you really want to just test it out just to see how your team does, if you're really early on, maybe like level 60s across the board, maybe even less, start with difficulty 1 just to get an idea of what you're exactly facing, what type of enemy you're facing. Obviously, the videos I do about Record Buster, like the Gareth Record Buster video that I did about 2-3 days ago, that's a perfect example for you to go watch and see what the enemy does. In all honesty, you don't have to necessarily sit through the pain of doing a run basically to understand what he does, when you can just watch a video like mine and go from there. But if you really want to, do difficulty 1 and then slowly just start increasing the difficulty. I think that's the best way to go about it, in all honesty, is to just slowly start increasing the difficulty if you're starting off Record Buster for the first time, just to get an understanding of like where your limits are, maybe where can you push it a little bit more. Now, one thing to note is that increasing the difficulty is a game changer in my opinion. Sometimes there are rare cases where I feel like the lower difficulty does give you more points, but that's assuming you can't even get past turn 8 or turn 10 on the higher difficulty effectively. You could arguably score better completing all 15 turns on difficulty 6 versus completing only like 8 to 7 turns on difficulty 7. So bear that in mind when you're choosing your difficulty. Okay, so I'm gonna choose difficulty 7 because that's the scores I can get. I'm able to get maximum scores on difficulty 7. So this is the team I rock, right? So why did I build a team like this? What do they all have in common that works so well for this team? And why does this team work so well, even though there is a light resistance? Mind you, remember, I spoke about this in the Gareth video. The Gareth has a light resistance and a physical resistance, and yet I'm in the top 500. How is that possible? Well, it's a combination of various things, and the first thing I'm going to talk about is the assists. Now, when you're going into Record Buster, bear in mind, your objective is to score as high as possible, and the best way to do that is by hitting the opponent as hard as possible. Of course, there are also caveats to that, but the main aim of any player when you're going into Record Buster is get to turn 15 and deal as much damage as possible. Now, the first thing to note is what I said at the start there. Hit turn 15. If you can get to turn 15 without any issues, with just purely your main units alone, you know, your Lazar, your Haruhime, your Fianna, your Finn, all of those, just them alone can get you to turn 15. You go full offense on your assist slot. Like, if you look at my assist slot, they all focus on a couple of things. They focus on SA gate charge, they focus on critical rate and counter rate increases, they focus on debuffing the enemy with lowered light resistance, lowered physical resistance, right? Buffing the allies light attack damage and stuff like that, debuffing the enemy so that they take more damage from single target attacks. That is the objective of assist. Now, if you are struggling with assist buffs and you want to kind of, you know, or not necessarily struggling with assist buffs, but if you're struggling to reach turn 15, I should say, then you start considering what are your weakest assists. Who doesn't do the most here? Like, for example, in my team, I would say the unit that doesn't do a lot, frankly speaking, is probably this Apollo, in all honesty. As much as he gives the 15% STR and he drops down the light resistance by 15%, in all honesty, I personally do believe, and this is just my personal opinion, I feel like this Apollo is doing the least out of the lot in terms of like providing, you know, providing a lot of damage to my enemy. I'd rather instead go for something like this Hestia, for example. This Hestia over here. This Hestia is a perfect example of a great unit that will be able to help you out in both offense and defense, because she lowers the opponent's strength and magic so that they deal less damage, and she also increases your allies' counter rate. Really, really handy. Very, very handy. So if you are struggling, then start putting in one by one more defensive assists. Start with one, then maybe two if you're really struggling, and then potentially if you are really struggling as well, consider using adventurers that are more defensive. Like, for example, chuck in a Galmus or something like that. There are ways to try and basically get a little bit more security from your team effectively, but that's my point when it comes to assists. Go offensive. Try and get as much offense going if possible. SA gate charge, debuffs on your enemy through resistance debuffs, buffing your team through strength or magic or light attack damage or elemental attack damage, I should say, just generally debuffing the enemy's damage received from, you know, single target attacks. Well, in Record Buster it'll be single target attacks only. You can't go for AoE attacks. Keep that in mind. If you see an assist that can effectively increase the damage you do on the enemy using AoE attacks, or all enemies attacks, I suppose. Is it single target or all targets? I think it's called all targets, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, I can check this Rene, because Rene has this ability. Yeah, she has attack type all and single targets. Try and focus on units that have only single targets. Of course, this Rene does single targets, plus she lowers the enemy's critical rate and penetration rate, which helps actually. So yeah, that's the reason why we have this unit right here. But that is basically the assist side of things. Now, before we get into the adventurers and exactly what we do with the adventurers, because I feel like the assist slots are very easy to understand. You know what you're doing with them because they're one slot. They have one skill and that's it. And they're consistent throughout the fight. Mind you, remember, they're consistent throughout the fight. The enemy cannot remove the assist debuffs or buffs or anything of that sort. So you are secured. Once you get your assist, you are fine. Now comes to the adventurers. But before we get into the adventurers, like I said, there's one point I want to make. When you're putting in an assist or you're putting in an adventurer, remember, the assist buff cannot be shared with another assist buff. They don't stack. So let's say, for example, I have two units that give STR here. I think that I do have two units that give STR here. Apollo gives STR 15% and Felice also gives STR 8% here, right? On the bottom of her assist skill. Bear in mind, Felice's STR skill will not override the Apollo skill because the Apollo skill is higher, but she won't also stack on top of the Apollo, so it won't become 23%. That's not possible. That doesn't happen. So whatever assists you have, be careful with how you're choosing your assists. Don't try and combo assist skills thinking they will stack up. They don't stack up. Remember that. Keep that in mind. It just doesn't work at all. Now, you might be wondering, well, Gale, this I's SA gate charge increases for self by 111%, but then you also have this Ali who gives 22% SA gate charge. Why are you running that? Well, the thing is, here in this specific case, it's significantly different. There is a basically, I don't know exactly my math right now. On the top of my head, I need to switch on Do Not Disturb there. Thank you very much. You guys will probably not see anything on screen there, but the difference between Ali's skill and Aiza's skill is basically 99% effectively, which is insane. It's a ridiculous amount effectively. Not 99%, a little less than that. I think it's like 90% effectively or something like that. 89%. Actually, it might be 89%. My math is all over the place right now, but let's say 89% difference. That is a significant amount. That is a significant amount, and it will just help the team a lot more, because what you want to do in a run is get as much SA gate charge as possible. There are also other cases of this, like for example, Al-Kitian also gives self STR and match 20%, but of course Haruhime is coming from the back, so it helps out. That's another thing to keep in mind. It's ideal to keep all your debuffs in the front 4 slots, because the last unit can come in from the back and apply the buffs. So it's okay, because then that unit will also get those buffs, right? So it's actually beneficial to get in the buffs from the back, right? Okay, now let's talk about the units themselves. Let's talk about adventurers. Actually, no, 1 second. I have to actually finish off that point about the assist skills. So like I said, assist buffs, they don't stack. Adventurer buffs don't stack either. So 2 adventurers cannot buff each other up the same way. So if Lazar has an STR buff and Fianna also has an STR buff, whoever's the highest will override that basically. That will be the main one. The other one will just go in the wind. It won't count at all. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But adventurer and assist skills, they stack. So assist, if they buff STR and then Fianna buffs STR, they will stack effectively. They can happen together. Adventure and adventure, no. Assist and assist, no. Adventure and assist, yes, that works. Okay, so bear that in mind, keep that in mind, okay, when you're going into these team building exercises. Don't try and do similar things across units and stuff like that. It just doesn't work. And I'll come on to that in just a moment with one of our units in this list, right? Or 2 of our units in this list, I should say. So now I'm going into Record Buster, right? And of course, this will all depend on what Record Buster you're facing, what weaknesses and stuff like that. But I'm going to talk about this team right here. The reason why I like this team a lot, and I know a lot of people would question Haruhime's position here, because a lot of people have been switching to a 4 DPS rotation, which is great. I think if you can get 4 DPS units and, you know, you are fine, absolutely go for it. That is perfect, because that will get you the most score, because you're dealing so much more damage, right? Whereas Haruhime here, she's a little bit of a, I wouldn't say necessarily a dead slot. She's here primarily for a protection, extension of buffs, and on top of that, she will tremendously help out with also just being able to support the team to deal a little bit more damage. She won't do enough damage, but the rest of the team will, basically, because of her. So what I'm doing here, and I'm going to talk about 2 units in particular first and foremost. We're going to look at Helga and Rene. Why are they there? They don't have the right assist. They don't have assists. Rene is +1. Why are they there? Well, in Record Buster, we do this one thing, and even in Familiar Rush, to an extent, we do this one thing called sacrificial units, rotational units, revolving units. You can call them any of those 3. They are there to basically apply a debuff or buff on your enemies / allies respectively, right? So for example, we use Helga here, or I use Helga here primarily for the reduction in P-res for 5 turns, a -40% physical resistance. That helps out the rest of the team to deal more damage, because if you look at the rest of the team, Lazar's skills, he doesn't debuff the enemy's physical resistance. Finn, he debuffs light resistance, he doesn't debuff physical resistance. Fianna doesn't do a debuff at all. She buffs everybody instead, and she extends buffs basically. She doesn't do anything else here. So effectively, Helga is there to deal more damage. Another unit that we have here, of course, that helps out a lot is Rene. Now Rene kind of overwrites or is overwritten by Finn, because Finn also has a similar ability here where you can increase the damage received. But what she's here for primarily is that -40% and -40% critical rate and penetration rate. I think I said -40% twice. She's there for the critical rate and penetration rate down, basically. which helps out the team tremendously, because that means you won't get hit with some randomly overpowered attack from the Record Buster boss, because they will do a ridiculous damage because they managed to critical you, or they managed to penetrate you, or something along those lines. That's what this Rene is here for primarily, right? So you want to use units like that. Some units that can protect you, some units that can deal more damage, some units that can lower the opponent's guard rate, whatever it may be. That's what these units are here for, and that's what these 2 slots are here for. You can okay, sorry, there we go, got there in the end. I by mistakenly scrolled to the other one, the daily slot, as I like to call it. That's the slot I used to just get my daily run in, basically. But yeah, this is that's what the sacrificial units are there for. I also am able to put the weaker assists, or the assists that, you know, are there for mainly just debuffing or buffing the team up with SAK charge or whatever it may be, so that they're just there off rip, basically. And that's why I have Ali on Helga's position, and why I have Felice on Rene's position. Makes sense, right? So there you have it. That's what the sacrificial units are. Now, when you're building your DPS team, and this is where I'm going to look at the first 3 units, and then we'll talk about why I bring Haruhime in. Let's talk about the front 3 units. They all go well together, and that's the big thing when you're building a team in Record Buster, is that they need to operate together extremely well. If you look at, for example, Lazar here, right? Lazar, what he does is he gives allies STR, heal, and light attack damage, along with P-Res and M-Res for 40% for 4 turns. He also lowers the opponent's STR and magic and penetration rate as well. Again, helping your team be a little bit more secure with that last part. But the primary thing you need to look at is that help he gives with the SCR and light attack damage bonus. Along with that, he obviously is able to, you know, give heal to everybody with that 40% HP heal on his flash leap. Obviously, you're going to use that because you want to give him the guard rate and agility bonuses as well. Remember when I talked about the terminology in the video? If you want to check out that video, you can. There is a video entirely on terminology and what do stats mean. Agility is an important stat because it not only determines how fast you go, but it also gives additional bonuses to certain stats like rates, basically. So certain rates like counter rate and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken. I think counter rate was the one with agility. So that's important as well. On top of that, he gives 10% 8 MP heal and ailment cure. Now, ailment cure is something you don't need to worry about. We'll talk about that at the end of the video. But the 10% MP heal is tremendous because if you look at a unit like, for example, Finn, right? If you were to use his second skill, Leading Spear, consistently because you're trying to give him that buff and, you know, apply a debuff on the enemy, you're using 110 MP, which is a hefty amount. Or, for example, if you want to use his third skill for some reason, that's 230 MP. So Lazar having that MP heal is tremendous. On top of that, you have to also look at this skill that Finn has, and we'll come on to it why that's important, because we'll talk about what Fianna does. I was gonna say Helga, but we have to talk about what Fianna does, for example. So what Finn does is that he does high light physical attack damage plus 20% per self, STR, magic, endurance, agility, dexterity, and SAK charge buff effect, which is very vital. And I'll come on to why that helps, why that gets a lot of help from a unit like Fianna, because Fianna's skills is increasing STR, magic, endurance, agility, and dexterity, as well as SAK charge. So Fianna helps Finn out tremendously here. Obviously, she gives herself light attack damage as well. And on top of that, this is where I bring in a very, very, very important stat or effect effectively in this game, and that is the status debuff on foes and status buff on allies plus 2 turns. What that does is basically it allows you to extend your buff duration and lower and increase also the enemy's debuff duration as well. Obviously, there are turns in Record Buster. You might have seen Gareth, Otaro, Riveria, whoever it may be, they can remove the debuffs on themselves, or they're able to remove the buffs on yourself. So that's a little bit of a problem. But as long as you have a unit like Fianna or Haruhime, which we'll come on to in just a second, they will be perfectly fine. So that's a very important thing to note as well, is that that's a very, very strong ability to have, right? To have all of that, and then that helps out Finn because he needs that to deal extreme amounts of damage through his single target attack. So keep that in mind. Now, another thing to note when you're building your teams as well, right, is that when you have skills like these, right, where it's like, oh, STR, magic, endurance, agility, dexterity, and SAK charge buff, that isn't only just from adventurer buffs, that's also taking your assist buffs into account. So you need to make sure that when your units have something like, oh, light attack damage bonus plus 100% per, or light a single target light attack damage dealing attack, basically that increases damage per, you know, light attack damage buff, basically you can get that from both the assists and the adventures. I struggle to speak there, but basically you get what I mean, right? So let's look at Fianna's, right? Fianna has 100% more damage per self SAK charge buff. So if you only did the adventurer skill, she would only get 100% of that extra damage, basically. But if you add in Alkitian's attack damage bonus that she gives for light attacks, that's 200% attack more damage, basically. So bear that in mind. It's a very, very important skill, and it's very, very important to keep that in mind, that you need that across your team. And that's why, you know, you have units like Felice helping out with the you know, wide range of buffs, basically your SCR, magic, agility, dexterity, and endurance. We anyways get the SA gauge charge from Ali as well. So yeah, that's very, very important. But the big thing here is, and the reason why this team works so well, is because they're cohesive. They work together extremely well. And if you look at any team on this list as well, let's look at all players list. A lot of people are using win teams today, right? Or this run, basically, to be able to get as much score as possible. And look at that, everybody's running a win team, and they even have Rei at the back instead of Haruhime in the back compared to what I do, so that they're able to deal as much damage as possible. So this is the team they're going for. It's a lot more synergy, it's a lot more work happening together, and it's the reason why you're able to get 2.3 billion score in this record buster, which is insane. It's a ridiculous score, but again, it just works because they're obviously playing to the advantage of the weakness that Gareth has, and it just works out a lot more smoothly, right? Now, let's talk about why I have Haruhime. Why do I have Haruhime? Why is Haruhime there, and what does she do to the team? Well, primarily, she's there to give support, right? A lot of players don't realize that this unit is actually really, really good for your team, especially because of how much support you're getting from her. Now, of course, I would like to acknowledge that you want to go for probably a 4th DPS unit, like a lot of people have been going. I mean, if you look at any other team, right, let's look at GPAC maybe. I'm curious to see what he has. He has a very similar team to me, so no, that doesn't count. That doesn't count. That does not count. This doesn't count either. But if you looked at previous record busters, I want to see if there is somebody who's running that sort of a team that I'm mentioning. These are dark teams, of course, that we're running with. But a lot of people would run a team like, I think Paul actually has it. Paul might actually have it. Yes, Paul has it. Paul is running a 4 DPS team. He's running Earth Lazar, Fianna, Finn, and the Light Lazar. He's got a Turtle and the Haruhime as extra units, basically as support units, the sacrificial units. But the other 4 are all DPS units, whereas I'm running in Haruhime. So why is that? Why am I running Haruhime in that position? Well, one, I don't have Lazar. My Earth Lazar, well, I actually do have Earth Lazar, but he's like +1 or +2 tops. That's not good enough. I also have Toka, who's also a good option, especially for the light team, but she's also like +2 or +3, and I don't have her weapon, in all honesty. And I can't even craft her weapon because for some reason the game decides to remove all collab weapons, which is really freaking annoying, to be quite honest. So instead, what I'm doing is I'm running Haruhime, and Haruhime does a lot here. Her main thing is her special arts. She gives STR and magic 120% to all allies and gives an increased SA gauge charge boost of 44%. If you recall earlier on in the video, we saw, you know, well, Haruhime also does it, but even Fianna and Haruhime only both give 33% on their skill 1, whereas Haruhime gives 44%. On top of that, Haruhime also has that ability to give herself 111%, which means you're gonna get a higher rate of SA gauge charges, which means you potentially will have an extra SA gauge charge versus your mate or something like that, right? So that means you're able to launch off 1 more special arts, which is very, very good. On top of that, Haruhime is going to give out good support with obviously the resistances to physical and magic attacks, the regen, very good. But again, like the Fianna, she has a really good skill where she's able to extend the opponent's debuffs and increase your buff duration as well. So that's very good. She also has a 10% MP heal. So basically this Haruhime is here primarily, like I said, for support. She's not there for anything else, but she's there for support, and that's very important. But yeah, that is the team basically, and that's how you build a team effectively. The team you build is primarily seeing how well they work together. Okay, one can do, let's say for example, let's take a fire team. I'm gonna look at my fire team here, for example. Tiona here basically gives me the ability to reduce the opponent's fire resistance and magic resistance, which is very nice. Ice here is able to also do the same thing, but obviously do P-Res instead of M-Res, but she also gives your allies P-Res and M-Res. Survivability is massively increased. She also gives allies STR and fire attack damage. Wealth over here is able to debuff the enemy's single target attack damage received, or increase it, I should say, increase the amount of damage they receive from all types and all targets or single targets. He also is able to give us the SA gauge charge and increase the magic dexterity and fire attack damage. Now, of course, these are much lower multipliers compared to what we've just seen from, like, for example, Fianna and Lazar, but these are like 2-3-year-old units basically. So that's the reason why they're there. Now, one thing to note, I spoke about ailments, right? What do you do with ailments, right? Should I be worried about ailments? No, not necessarily so. I've spoken about this in my crafting video, but if you go into change equip and if you go into armor, you want to craft a lot of these glorious anklets, because more often than not, the opponents will either stun, seal, poison, charm. It's random. Usually it's stun and seal more often than not. Sometimes they've done sleep as well, if I recall correctly, but often it's stun and seal. They also can slow you, but slow more often than not, most people just tend to ignore and move on from there. They don't really care too much about that. And of course, with a unit like Lazar, you can kind of ailment cure that, so that's not really something to stress about, to be quite honest. But that's a very important thing to note. So my key points here today are: focus on making sure you're getting all the buffs possible that will help you out, or all the debuffs as much as possible, either or, depending on what you're trying to aim for. If you're struggling to survive, start adding one more defensive assist. That might help you out tremendously. Another thing to remember, assist skills do not stack on each other. Adventure skills do not stack on each other. Adventure and assist skills, when you combine those two, they stack up, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And then when you're trying to build your adventurer setup, cohesion. Focus on cohesion. See what units work together well. Look at what they do. Look at their elements, because the one thing to note, it's not like war games where you could potentially run multiple elements together and they will work. Like for example, if you look at my war games team right now, right, they work together tremendously, even though they basically are of like 4 different elements, basically 3 to 4 different elements. Yeah, 3 elements. So on the front line is 3 elements, back line is 2 extra elements, right? That works well. It gets me to Jester, sometimes it gets me to King 1 at the very least. Very good. Even this team, it's 2 earth, 2 fire, 2 dark. It works. It just works. So keep that in mind. Like, Wreck-It Buster is all about cohesion. War Games is also about cohesion, but in a different way, which we'll talk about in a different video. But Wreck-It Buster is all about offense, cohesion between units, and ensuring you get to turn 15 effectively. That's what matters the most, right? So bear that in mind. Another thing to note, you can go 4 DPS, and 4 DPS will probably get you a much higher score than a 3 DPS plus 1 support setup. But if you're struggling to survive and you want that extra bit of support for some reason, or you want to get that, extension in buffs and debuffs and stuff like that, you could run a Haruhime or something. That'll still work. And then if you go into Memorias as well, which I should mention, this is also very, very good, especially now that they're adding more Memorias like this one on the left, where they're extending beyond turn 7 like this one. That's also very important. Now, another thing to note that I forgot to mention as well is, since you're focusing on damage as much as possible, taking damage is not necessarily a bad thing, because what you want to do is you want to counter the enemy. The counters actually do a lot of damage as well. So bear that in mind. Dealing counters is just as important as, dealing damage normally as well, because you get a lot more score from just being able to counter like an extra 5 to 6 times, let's say. That'll give you a big jump in your score, trust me on that. So that is basically it. I don't think I've missed out on anything else in particular when it comes to Record Buster. I think I've covered a lot of the major points I've wanted to when it comes to equipment like Glorious Anklets and just team building in general, in terms of like what do you want to do with sacrificial units, what do you want to do with your main units, what do you want to do with your assist units. So let me know what you guys think. Do you guys enjoy this type of video in terms of this being the order? It's a 30-minute video. I know it's a bit of a lengthy one, but I think I've covered a majority of the stuff I've wanted to in terms of talking about what exactly do these units do and how do they work together well. But yeah, let me know in the comment section down below what do you guys think. Of course, I would appreciate any feedback, of course, in regards to like future videos. Like I want to do more for team building on Familiar Rush, and of course war games and stuff like that. So let me know in the comment section down below. Once again, appreciate all of you guys for watching this video. Leave a like if you did enjoy it. Subscribe, of course, for to see more Danmemo content, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye, everybody.